Hey everyone, welcome back to Marketing Blueprint. Thank you for joining for yet another episode. As usual, I have a fantastic guest, Malcolm. Welcome to Marketing Blueprint. Thank you for joining me today. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me, Julian. Super excited to be here and catch up.
And it's actually great because for once I have someone who is on the East Coast, which makes it so much easier to schedule something that's working for the both of us. So a big thank you for that. I don't know how familiar you are with Marketing Blueprint, but we always start the same way, which is a quick review of your background, your journey, that I'm trying to get as close to reality as possible. And if I get things wrong, well, you'll have a chance to correct me on that.
Yeah, of course.
Good with that? Cool. So you actually started your career as a marketing coordinator at a company called Fanatics. You tried multiple aspects of digital marketing at that point until you reached the nice title of Senior Manager Digital Marketing. You moved on to W4 for a larger scope then as Director Digital Media. Then you went to Fox Sports, where you went down one level as Senior Manager, then moved to Big Commerce, where you climbed back up to your Director level. Then you moved to a pretty famous company with Box, where you were director of the entire demand gen. Then there was Adobe for a similar role. Then you moved to RingCentral as a VP demand gen. Then you took something that very few people think about taking, and probably more people should, which was a full-time parenting break.
Yeah.
And you are now Senior Vice President Growth Marketing at Finipay. Is that a good picture?
That is a great summarization of the long journey that I've been on. That's a good one.
So you started, like I said, you started as marketing coordinator. Do you feel like it kind of set the tone to your career? Did it have a huge impact on everything coming after? Was it a decision? How did that impact your journey?
It actually had a massive impact. My time at Fanatics was what set me on the path to be a marketer. What's not on the resume, what you probably didn't see. There was an internship at a law firm. There was some time in some mall retail stores, right? And I think the Fanatics role as a marketing coordinator was my first go at like the real thing, right? I needed this money to survive and pay my rent. And it was the first real job that I had. And it started as a part-time college gig. I was a kid who wanted to work in sports and sell jerseys out of the mall. And so I said, hey, Fanatics sounds great. Because when I joined, they were 3 people. And it was not the massive e-commerce retailer that it is today. So the marketing coordinator role for me was, we learned how to do Google AdWords. We learned how to do affiliate marketing. And I was learning so much on the job that I was going to school at night. And for me, it was a very unorthodox college lifestyle, but marketing coordinator was certainly where I cut my teeth.
Okay, so it kind of set the tone. So before that, you were doing a bunch of other stuff that were completely unrelated. But what was your dream job as a kid? Because you didn't start as a marketer for your first internship. So I'm assuming CMO or SVP of growth marketing was not your dream at the time. What was your dream at the time?
I mean, growing up in the 80s, I think being a fighter pilot, watching Top Gun, and that was my dream as a kid. That or playing in the NBA. Didn't quite work out in height, and I can't see as well to be a pilot. So marketing coordinator was the next best thing, I guess.
Option 3 was the right one. Okay,
there it is.
Perfect. I mentioned something else when I was talking about your journey. You've accepted at some point in your career to take a step back because I'm assuming because that was a much bigger group you were joining, Fox Sport, and probably when you move from a tiny 5-people company, you can be the CMO or chief of the entire world. But then when you move to a 5,000 people company, you probably have to look at things differently. Nonetheless, that's kind of a big decision to make, and it can be hurting your ego at some point. Was it easy? Was it an easy decision? Was it the right decision? Is it something that people should consider doing more often?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the nuance between titles and the perceived taking a step back, you've got to remember that when you are working at larger companies, there are many different layers, and titles are very different. My time at Adobe was the titling and layering was very different than when you're at a startup. So a lot of times a senior manager to a director or this or the other can in reality be a lateral move. For me at the time, I was working at an agency at W4. I think they were under a different name at the time, or are now. They've been acquired. But when I was at W4, smaller team, smaller company, we were an agency of 50 to 100 people. I had a team of maybe 5. So taking a step from a director at that level to a senior manager at a massive organization, in reality felt like actually a step up, even though the title was going backwards. So I think, following your passion, to me, and following what you're interested in is way more important than the title.
So I'm hearing, don't have too much ego on the title. Look at the actual responsibilities.
Totally.
Look at what you're going to learn. Look at what you're going to be doing. That's what matters.
100%. 100%. I think for me, my role at Fox Sports was to lead our fantasy football program. So my job was literally to get people to sign up to play fantasy football. So, that was a huge draw. But I think learning how to operate in a larger organization was something that I wanted to learn how to do. And that was more important to me than the title.
So now moving on to what it is to be a marketer today. And tell me if you see the things differently. But I have the feeling that since COVID, or a couple of years after the breakout, we're kind of in a society where in big companies, CFOs are in charge, and CMOs are now here to push whatever is measurable, whatever is trackable, whatever you can put in an Excel sheet, whatever can be translated in leads and pipe in revenue. And influence marketing is a little bit more difficult to explain to people who are not coming from the marketing world. I feel like the word demand gen today really means lead gen. And there is a whole aspect of demand gen that kind of disappeared. It's probably very cyclic. What disappeared today may come back in a 3 years time. But I do believe from our past conversation that you have that belief of the long-term vision, that you need to educate the market, that you need to build the brand, that lead gen is great, but lead gen on its own might be a little bit limiting. What would you tell marketers nowadays that are actually starting their first job in this context? What would you tell them to learn? What skills do they need to create, to get, in order to make sure that when the next cycle comes and we stop thinking short term and we start thinking long term again, they are ready for that and they are not just too locked in a tiny cell?
Julian, that is such a great question. Such a great question. And I think you mentioned that marketers are hyper focused on measurement, and I think that is a cyclical trend. And I think grounding yourself in data driven decisions is always a healthy choice. But when you look back along, the 60s, 70s, 80s, like the measurement was not as sharp as it is today. So I think, rewinding to those times, people had to talk a lot more about influence and, hey, if you go run this ad or you put up this billboard, things are going to happen. And it was more of an influence model. Whereas we've gotten very spoiled as marketers in our generation of looking at Google Analytics and Adobe Analytics and click data and being able to measure every single activity. And the interesting thing is, Julian, I think we're actually going back to a place where influence needs to be thought about in a more relevant way. With influencers on social media, it's not as easy to track. With Gen AI right now, if you go do a prompt on any of the LLMs, you're going to get a response that may not have a link, that's not trackable. And someone is going to have to go then do a branded search or go to your website. And those things are unnoticeable. So I think we're getting back to a place where marketers need to flex their influenced muscle and understand how those things work. But aside from the data and the measurement, talking about trends and what to be on top of, I think for me, I was very lucky and fortunate, but I took advantage of that opportunity. And when I started my career, something called Google AdWords came out. And I said, hey, let's test this new thing. And I did that for 5, 6 years. And then Facebook came along. And it's like, hey, they've got these things called flyer ads. And let's go test those out. So I think the lesson here, and now it's Gen AI, right? So I think the lesson here is stay thirsty, stay hungry, be interested in what the new trends are and how you can use them in your business. And just know that it's going to change and evolve, and just stay on top of the trends. And this one may not be perfect for you, but maybe the next one is. So just make sure you're always learning and sharpening the saw.
So something that's interesting is on Marketing Blueprint, I've interviewed quite a few CMOs, VP marketing leaders of all sorts in all countries. And one thing that I did not anticipate was that many of them were not coming from a marketing background. Many of them were actually ex-engineers of different flavors. And it feels like nowadays, to be a marketer, you probably still need to have that creative mind, but it's may not be as important today as having a analytical mind, where you understand data. And especially when you start climbing up that ladder and you need to talk to execs, you need to speak their language, and they talk revenue. They don't talk views, they don't talk traffic, they don't even talk leads. Often they talk revenue. So you have to speak that. What do I need today to be in your shoes? If I want to get your job in the next 5 years, I'm in whatever industry, do I need to continue focusing on almost being an engineer and being able to make data speak? Or do I need to be creative? Or do I need to be schizophrenic and have both sides of the brain very well developed?
So philosophically, I think it's about balance. And it's kind of a loaded answer because I'm not picking a lane here. I think you have to be data-driven and ground your decisions in data. But you have to be prepared for moments when you don't have all of the data, and you have to rely on your experience or your creativity. And I think being able to do both, one of my mentors used to say, when we would do forecasting and budgeting and making large investment decisions, it's part art and it's part science. The science part is you get as much data as you possibly can, and you can probably get yourself to maybe 60% confidence. But then there's that 40% gap that you just got to tell the story. You've got to be creative about how you connect the dots. You've got to be able to take a leap of faith based on your experience and that feeling when you're like, something doesn't quite look right. Let's go this direction. And so anyway, to someone starting out who may not have that experience, rely on the data as much as you can, and you will start to see trends form. And that's how you build the experience over time. And pattern recognition will kick in, and you'll kind of feel like, okay, I've seen this movie before, and I know we should go this way.
So something you said just now about creating the narrative, building the story, is actually incredibly important, because in your role today, I believe in your past roles as well, you've been in touch with executives, and that can be a bit scary when it's the first time it happens, because I mean, you are talking to the guy who is signing your check at the end of the day. You're talking to the guy who may decide you may not be worth the job, and you may be jobless on the next morning. So it can be very scary when it's the first few times you get there. How did you build that muscle where you are able to tell the story so that the first time you talk to an exec, you don't actually, lose your ability to tell the story, but you have this prepared? Is it a lot of rehearsing? Is it because someone was holding your hand, teaching you the tricks? How did you get there?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So you're going to be nervous. At least I was, and I still am sometimes, right? You're talking about very important things, and I think everybody does better in different situations. I'm better in a boardroom and in a one-on-one meeting than I am public speaking, and other people might feel the opposite. But for me, it's about the preparation. And so what I mean by that is a lot of QBRs or quarterly business reviews where folks have to present, here's how the company did, or here's how my patch of the business did for this period of time. Sometimes these slide decks can turn into hundreds and hundreds of slides. And you think to yourself, well, I'm never going to get through all these. Why am I creating them? And if it's not a slide deck, maybe it's a document that you're creating. But the idea is that by going on that journey, doing the research, formulating your thoughts, typing it all out, ensuring that you've got your bullets for each point that you want to get across, that preparation is actually what gives you the confidence to be able to go into those rooms and deliver the message, whether you have the slides or not. And I think that's the key is the preparation and digging into the data and knowing the story, or at least how you see the story, is going to give you all the confidence you need to deliver that message.
You know what? I love what you're saying here, because how many times have I been in that situation where we create that 100 slides deck and we know before we start that we're going to go through 2 slides.
Yep.
And then there's going to be a million questions and we're never going to move from slide 2 ever again. But I agree. It's the whole prep time is actually helping you build that story. Okay, so you mentioned something else when you were talking about creating the story. You mentioned that one of your mentors told you about the science piece and the art piece. Can you tell us a little bit about your mentors? Is it people who found you? Is it people you found? Did you actively seek mentors? Is it something that's still useful for you today? Is it something that you recommend younger marketers should also find at some point? How important is it to have a mentor to be successful in your marketing career?
Yeah, so I mean, a mentor can be anyone. It doesn't have to be an official mentee program, right? When I talk about mentors, it's folks that I think about who I can confide in, who have been there for me, and who can help me along and maybe have seen things that I have not seen before. And when I think about my career, some have presented themselves to me, and others I've just kept in touch with because I'm like, wow, this guy's really sharp or gal's really sharp, and I'd like to stay in touch. And I think the concept of mentorship blends very much so with your network. And starting out, I heard that a lot as a young marketer, like, hey, build your network. And I never really understood what that meant. And now that I'm on the other side, 25 years into my path in marketing, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, my network is everything to me now, right? And I think it just happens organically. And I think the couple of lessons for building a network and keeping in touch with mentors is just don't burn any bridges. Like, there's going to be times where you are in a situation, you find yourself and you're not happy, and you're like, I've got to make a change. And you may be tempted to slam the desk or say some things that make you feel better in the moment, but it certainly would burn a bridge. And I think just bite your tongue and hold that thought. And you never know when you might need that person again. And I've actually been really good at keeping strong relationships with most of the leaders in my past. I think back to Fanatics. I still keep in touch with Brian Swallow, who was my boss 25 some odd years ago, and is now SVP over at Fanatics. And I keep in touch with folks at Adobe and folks at Box, and they're always there for a good reference or even for a placement in a role that you might be seeking. So I think good networks and keeping in touch with mentees or mentors is always a good way to go.
But how do you do that? I mean, you mentioned Box and Adobe, and I know some of the people because we've all worked together at some point. The new, well, not new anymore because she's been there for a while, but the head of marketing of Dropbox, we've known for a while, you much longer than I. She was on Marketing Blueprint a year ago. And you guys have been working together at several companies. Ben is another person that's been working with you at several companies. How do you just keep in touch? Because it sounds easy when you say that, but as you build your career, you haven't met 10 people. You've met hundreds of people. So do you have to actively push yourself to pick up your phone every now and then? Or is it something natural to you? How do you do that?
That's a great question. And I think the key for me before you even get to communication and how to keep in touch, it's building trust. And it's going beyond just the day-to-day and delivering what you have to deliver for the job. It's getting to know that person, knowing their kids, knowing their hobbies, and knowing what makes them tick, and really being a true friend. And I don't mean a casual, office mate. Like, really get into their life and understand who they are, and find things that you appreciate about them, and create bonds that will last. Because you're going to spend a lot of time with the folks you work with. I laugh with my wife. I'm like, hey, I spend more time with some of the folks I work with than I do my wife at home. And so creating those strong relationships is super important. And then when it comes to staying in touch, I think we're all quite spoiled with LinkedIn and text messaging and calling and emailing. And some of the younger folks might be like, well, why are we spoiled? That's just the way it is. But a long time ago, those things didn't exist. But I think just once a month, once a quarter, set yourself an email reminder, reach out to so-and-so. And it does not have to be anything crazy. Just, hey, checking in, seeing how you're doing. Or, you can look up LinkedIn really quick, know where they're working. How's it going at Dropbox? How's it going at Adobe? How's it going at RingCentral, right? It's just an easy way to stay in touch. And then natural conversation will come out of that. But I do think you have to create that trust and that bond prior to asking for that communication later.
Okay. On a different topic now, you have worked for tiny companies. I mean, as you said, Fanatics at the beginning was 3 people and you.
Yeah.
You've worked at Fox Sport, you've worked at Adobe, so on the other side of the spectrum. Now you're working at Finipay, which is somewhere in between. Is there a better path? I'm starting a marketing career today. Should I go with a gigantic company where I'm going to learn structure and there's going to be clear hierarchy and clear career path? Or should I go scrappy and go for a startup that may be incredibly messy, but I'm going to touch everything and I'm going to learn fast? Is there a right path? And if so, in your opinion, should I start with the small or the big guys?
Well, there's no right or wrong path. I think everybody has their own interesting, unique, and valuable journey to themselves. But I will say some things I've learned from both sides is when you work at a startup and it's scrappy and you're moving fast, I think those years are best served earlier in your career. They take a lot out of you. It takes a lot of energy. And when you're trying to balance 2 kids and a wife and a mortgage and hobbies and all the things, that can be tough, and a lot of burnout can happen. I think doing that earlier in your career, taking the risks on startups, is probably a better way to go. But I will say, working at larger companies, you learn a lot about business acumen and processes and operations and just kind of the intangible skills that are going to help you anywhere you go. So I think it just depends on what your journey looks like. Everyone's is unique, but you're certainly going to learn a lot more about how to be scrappy, and you're going to learn about all the different marketing channels and all the different marketing skill sets if you're at a startup versus going to a larger company where you're going to be hyper focused. And I think, it's just, I think it's healthy to do both. I really do. Like, at some point in your career, if you can juggle doing one for a little while and then the other. But I know some people who have just stayed in startup land their whole career and they love it. And the opposite. I know people who have stayed up in massive companies and been at Adobe for 25 years and loved it. And I think it just depends on the person, but just know what you're getting into. That the startup world can be very hectic and stressful. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to create grit. But there's something to be said about the operations and the polish of working at a larger company.
All right. So whether it's a small or a large company, you've been working with a team for a while. You've had people reporting into you for quite a while already. What does it take to? So first of all, what does it take to work for 𝗪𝗶𝗫? Second, what does it take to get a promotion? And obviously, the rules and the processes will be very different from one company to the other. But what are you looking for in either hiring a person or promoting a person you've already been working for? And the idea behind is, again, I want to advance my career. What are the check boxes that I need to tick? If not to convince any CMO, at least to convince you, what do I need to do?
Yeah, love it. Love it. Great question. So when I was at BigCommerce, there was a mentor I had who taught me about bucket 1 and bucket 2. And it was early in my people management career, but it's stuck with me. I use it to this day, and I preach it. I scream it from the rooftops. Bucket 1 is your resume, your skill set, your accomplishments, your know-how, your abilities. And I think that those are extremely important, but also trainable. I can send you to a conference. I can send you to classes, textbooks, what have you, right? Those things are coachable and moldable. Bucket 2 is more about how you operate. And are you a collaborator? What drives you? Are you growth? Do you have a growth mindset? Are you someone who values trust? All of the things that are intangibles are the bucket 2s. And I look for bucket 2 way more than I look for bucket number 1, because those are the things you can't train. Those are the things that you cannot change in a person. And when I find someone with strong bucket 2 who's super coachable and knows a little bit about marketing, I will take that person over someone who's got all the things and is an asshole. Like, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss on the podcast, but to me, I think hiring someone who's coachable, has the intangibles, and knows how to get the job done to a certain level is going to be someone that I hire over someone who has straight A's on their resume.
You know, it's funny how working with specific people kind of influences you, because I could not tell you which words exactly, but a lot of what you said is what Joyce told me a year ago. Okay. You guys have a very similar mindset about, you know, having the growth mindset and everything. Beautiful. You did not rehearse together, but you obviously have the same vision.
We work very closely together, and yeah, and yeah, she is a valued mentor of mine as well. Yeah.
One last question. Something I've never touched on with my previous guest. You took a parenting break. And not only you did, because I'm guessing there are a few people who do it, but not many people actually say it out loud, especially in the US. I mean, I'm coming from France, so it's different culture altogether. But in the US, there is always that culture of you need to give 120% of the time. Yeah. And admitting that family matters, not everyone does that. How good was it for your own health? How good was it for your career? Is it something you would tell others they should do as well?
It was immensely valuable, Julian. I can't begin to describe how it changed the trajectory of my life. You know, I had a very successful career, and I was very fortunate. Had a pretty decent nest egg. My wife has been a stay-at-home mom for almost 8 years. And she has started getting into real estate and created her own real estate business. So she's an entrepreneur, and was getting to a point where she was ready to go into that full time. And I was at a point in my career where I had been going as fast as I could for 25 years, and I needed a break. And I went to my wife and said, "Hey, do you mind if I take 6 months off?" And she kind of gasped, was like, "I guess." And so it was completely unknown. Like I had somewhat of a plan. I knew about how much money we had that we could coast on for a while. And I knew I wanted more time with my kids, right? My kids were saying things that irked my heart about, you know, not being there enough. And that really brought me to the decision of, okay, I'm going to spend an entire summer with my 2 kids and my wife, and it's going to be a ball. And oh my gosh, was it? Like, we went fishing, we did road trips, we played so much baseball. Baseball's coming out of my ears. It was the most amazing summer that I had ever had. And I spent a little bit of time for myself too. I had time to work on music, which has been a passion of mine. I had time to get into a morning routine and just things that getting back to yourself and getting that mental health at a place that, I knew that I had scratched that itch. And by the time September, October rolled around, the kids were back in school. I knew I had grounded myself enough to go back to work. And I think I have come back to the workplace so much more productive because I'm not wondering anymore. And I don't have this nagging thing in the back of my mind of, well, what if I just have more time at home? Or what would it be like? Or all these things that I felt like I was brushing to the side, I had now contributed to. And now I've taken that back with me in the workplace and created boundaries where I have my morning routine that I have kept, and I'm not doing anything before 9 a.m. And I'm not doing anything after 6 because that's my time with my kids for dinner, tucking them into bed, reading them a story. And so those things have stayed with me and will probably stay with me until I am retired. So yeah, I highly recommend it to anyone. It was an amazing, amazing time.
So you took good care of your kids, you took good care of yourself. Now I need you to take good care of all the other youngsters out there. I have one last question.
Yeah.
For anyone who is a fresh grad, about to be graduated, and wants to start a marketing career for whatever reason, what is your top one piece of advice? And I mean, the past 30 minutes have been pretty insightful. You've given tons of advice already, but if you had one thing for these people starting a marketing career, what would it be?
Yeah. So I think the network and the organic mentoring will come. So I'm going to go with be curious and learn everything. So right now, Gen AI is the hot thing. And like I said before, you rewind to Google, and there was social media, e-commerce, and mobile. It's Gen AI right now, and learn everything you possibly can about it. Even if it doesn't become a new business that you start or a role that you get, it will help you in any role that you take, and it will help you get ahead of others. And anytime there is a disruptive technology into the market, learning that inside and out is going to be the best thing for you. So dig into that now, but the lesson really is to be curious and learn, because 5 years from now, it's going to be something different, and it's going to be the next thing and then the next thing. And you've just got to make sure you stay curious and keep learning.
Excellent. Well, Malcolm, thank you very much for your advice, for your wisdom for the past 30 minutes. Really appreciate you taking the time to spend a little bit with me and the rest of the community. Thank you, everyone, for watching today's episode of Marketing Blueprint. It's now available on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Deezer, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Podcast. And thank you again. Talk to you guys in a month's time. Thanks, Malcolm.
Thank you, Julian. Cheers.